All right, ready for a deep dive. Today, we're cracking open a book that's all about taking the road less traveled, you know, doing your own thing. It's Paul Jarvis's You Poon!
Which, for anyone who doesn't read Chinese, translates to the thinking and challenges of starting a one-person business.
Right, exactly. And now you might know Jarvis from his later book, Company of One, but this one came before. It's like peeking behind the curtain, seeing the foundation of his whole philosophy.
It really is. He holds nothing back. You can practically feel his own journey as he was writing this.
And to think he was at the top of his game when he started questioning it all.
He was designing websites for some seriously big names, even like pro athletes.
Pro athletes. Seriously. Okay, see, now that's what I'm talking about. You'd think web design for Shaq. I'm set. What more could you want? So where does it go from there?
And that's the thing. That's what makes Jarvis's story so powerful. He had this so-called dream, and he realized even that it can leave you feeling empty if it's not lining up with your values, you know?
It's like everyone's chasing this treasure that's already been found.
Right. It's gone.
So how do we even start figuring out what our treasure is, especially when it feels like everyone else is on this like pre-programmed path?
Jarvis has this great analogy. He compares it to those choose your own adventure books.
Oh, I loved those. Still do.
Me too. You're not just reading someone else's story. You're in the driver's seat, making the calls.
Instead of following someone else's faded treasure map, hoping the X is still there.
You get to draw your own map.
And find the gold that's meant for you. I love that.
And Jarvis would say a big part of that is like shifting your focus. Stop chasing external validation, the grades, the job titles,
Money.
all of it, and start tuning into your internal values, what matters to you, not what you've been told should matter.
He even talks about ditching his own goal of making $1 million a year.
Can you imagine?
And this is an entrepreneur saying this. It makes you think. What could be more important than hitting those big financial milestones?
Right. Like, isn't that the whole point? But for Jarvis, it was about making his work match his values, even if it meant ditching a number that society tells you equals success.
So he talks about this idea of enough. Enough is enough, but enough can be such a subjective word. How does he define it?
For him, it's not about deprivation or anything. It's about reaching a point where you're financially stable. You're comfortable, but the key is you have the freedom to choose work that lights you up.
Instead of always chasing more and more and more.
It's about asking what allows me to really live out my values.
Yeah.
And maybe even have a bigger impact because of it.
Such a good point. Especially in a culture where, let's be real, we often tie our self-worth to our net worth. So if it's not about chasing external validation or some arbitrary financial finish line, how do we break free? How do we carve that path?
Well, Jarvis would probably say it starts with embracing your weirdness.
Okay, I was hoping we'd get to this part.
He's all about embracing the weirdness. But he's not saying, show up to your next meeting in a clown suit.
Although, that could be pretty on brand for some folks, right?
Maybe. If that's authentically you, then hey, go for it. But yeah, it's not about being outlandish just for attention. It's more like leaning into what makes you you.
Yeah.
Even if it ruffles a few feathers along the way.
He's got some pretty strong opinions on, strategically using swear words in your work.
Oh, yeah. He talks about that.
Not just, dropping F-bombs left and right, but...
Right. It's intentional.
It's like he's saying, this is me, take it or leave it, which honestly takes some serious guts. Putting yourself out there, especially when you're first starting out, man, that can be scary.
It can be totally terrifying.
Yeah.
And he's really open about that.
Yeah.
He doesn't shy away from the fear stuff at all. He even admits to being, get this, afraid of public speaking.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
The guy who's a musician and performs live.
I know, right?
Wow. That's a pretty good reminder that none of us are immune to this stuff. Even the people who seem like they've got it all figured out. We all have those moments of what if that can keep us playing small. So how do we deal with that fear? How do we actually move through it?
One thing Jarvis talks about is kind of like slipping the script. So instead of getting consumed by fear, he says, try reframing it as gratitude.
Okay. Gratitude for what, though?
Gratitude for what you don't want to lose. Like, let's say you're terrified of quitting your job to start your own thing. Maybe, deep down, that fear is actually rooted in gratitude for the stability that job provides.
So it's not about ignoring the fear.
No, not at all. It's about understanding where it's coming from.
And maybe even using it as a kind of compass to point you toward what you truly value.
Exactly. And sometimes, he says, the best way to deal with fear is just to, acknowledge it and then do it anyway.
Just go for it.
Yeah. Don't wait for the fear to magically disappear or for everything to be perfect. It never will be. Just start. Even if it's messy, even if it's scary.
More excuses.
Pretty much. Because he's a big believer in good enough. Like perfectionism. He sees that as a form of procrastination.
Ooh, yeah, I can see that.
It's a way of avoiding putting your work out there.
Because we're so terrified of judgment.
Exactly. He actually uses this really great analogy. He talks about, what is it? A wooden puzzle. Where each piece is totally unique. And you have to keep trying different combinations to figure out what fits. And often that really satisfying click, it comes after a whole lot of almost.
I love that. What a great metaphor for building a business. Actually, for life in general, it's all about experimentation, trial and error.
And being okay with the stumbles along the way.
Speaking of stumbles, how does Jarvis say we should deal with setbacks? Because let's face it, when you put yourself out there, you're going to get some criticism. That's just part of the game.
He's really upfront about the fact that, yeah, he gets his fair share of negativity, but he's learned not to take it personally. Yeah. He focuses on, like, finding his people.
His tribe.
Exactly. The people who resonate with his message, who get it, and accepting that not everyone will.
Tuning out the noise.
Yeah.
Focusing on the signal.
And that's where building a good support system comes in. He talks a lot about the importance of community.
Surrounding yourself with people who get it.
Yeah. Like-minded people who understand the ups and downs of doing your own thing.
Yeah.
Because it's different. Right. It's not the traditional path.
It doesn't have to be a huge group of people either.
Not at all. It's more about the quality of the connections.
Right
Even
on.
just having a few trusted people you can bounce ideas off of, share struggles with, celebrate wins with.
It makes a world of difference.
It does. And on that note, he also talks about the power of mentorship. Finding people who are a few steps ahead of you, who've walked the path you want to walk, and learning from them.
Did he have any, like, mentors in his own life that he talks about in the book?
He does. He actually shares this story about, he was a huge fan of Jason Mraz.
Oh, cool. I love Jason Mraz.
Super talented guy. So anyway, Jarvis is at a coffee shop one day, and he sees Jason Mraz, like in real life. And he's freaking out, right? But he finally gets the courage to go up and talk to him.
What? Get out of here. What did he say?
I know. It's such a good story.
Yeah.
He basically just introduced himself, told him how much his music meant to him. And you know what? Jason Mraz was totally cool about it.
Yeah.
They ended up chatting for a bit, and it turned into this really cool moment of connection.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Even successful people put their pants on one leg at a time.
Right. They drink coffee.
They get starstruck too.
Exactly. And I think it just goes to show sometimes the scariest thing is just taking that first step, because you never know where it might lead you.
You know, it's funny, this whole conversation, it's got me thinking back to that choose your own adventure thing.
Yeah.
It's so easy to, like, get caught up in what everyone else is doing, you know?
Totally. Comparing our chapters, like, oh, they're at chapter 10 and I'm still on chapter 5.
Right. Am I behind? And that's what I love about Jarvis's message. He's like, screw that. There's no behind.
No right answer.
Yeah.
No single definition of success.
It's about writing your own definition.
And then actually living it, even if it looks totally different from everyone else's story.
Which takes guts. Let's be real. It's one thing to say you're going to forge your own path.
It's another thing to actually do it.
To face the fear, the uncertainty.
He doesn't pretend it's easy. He's real about the fact that, yeah, this stuff is challenging. If you want to build something meaningful, if you want to break the mold, it takes resilience. It takes believing in yourself, even when it's hard.
It makes you wonder, what would Jarvis say to someone listening right now who's like, yes, this is me. This is what I want. But they're also, like, kind of frozen, afraid to take that first step?
Honestly. I think he'd say, the scariest thing you can do is not try at all.
What if?
What if I reach the end of my life and my biggest regret is a whole bunch of what ifs?
Wow. Yeah, that's heavy stuff. It is, because none of us have forever, right? We can't just sit on the sidelines indefinitely.
No. So why not start now?
Today.
Exactly. Even if it's just a tiny step, like Jarvis, writing down all his fears.
Oh, yeah. He talks about that.
Big, small, didn't matter. Just getting them out of his head and onto paper.
It's amazing how much power those fears lose, right? When they're not trapped in our heads anymore.
It's like they shrink down to size. And then you've got all this space for creativity, for possibilities, for action.
So what could that action look like? What's a small step we could take today, right now?
Well, maybe it's finally sending that email you've been putting off to someone you admire asking for advice. Or blocking out just 30 minutes tomorrow morning to work on that passion project.
The one that keeps getting pushed aside.
Exactly. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be this big dramatic thing. Just start where you are with what you have.
It all starts with that first, often messy step.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into the brilliant mind of Paul Jarvis,
A true original.
what's your biggest takeaway? What's sticking with you? You know, for me, it's that reminder that there's no one right way to do this life thing, to build a career. It's about figuring out what makes you come alive, even if it's a little weird, and then going for it.
Beautifully said. For me, it's the power of action, baby. Don't wait for perfect. Just start.
Yes. Get it out there.
Share your gifts, your ideas, your weirdness with the world. We need it. So on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time for another adventure and knowledge, inspiration, and maybe even a little bit of weirdness.
Until then.